Hi, I'm Josh Tyson, co-author of Age of Invisible Machines, the first best-selling book about conversational AI. Age of Invisible Machines explores the learnings of industry veteran and OneReach.ai CEO Robb Wilson. Each week, Robb and I meet up to continue the conversations we started in the pages of our book. As we continue preparing for the Season 4 launch of Invisible Machines, I wanted to share this great conversation Robb had with Jess Larsen on the Leadership and Innovation podcast back in April. Known for in-depth interviews with uncommonly high achievers, including pro athletes, Fortune 500 CEOs, best-selling authors, and actors like Danny Glover, Leadership and Innovation is a far-reaching, forward-thinking podcast. This conversation between Robb and Jess features a lot of practical thinking about AI agents and their place in this rapidly expanding facet of organizational growth. Thanks to Jess Larsen and the team at Leadership and Innovation for facilitating this conversation and helping us share it with our UX Magazine audience. Invisible Machines is produced in partnership with OneReach.ai. Their Generative Studio X platform for orchestrating AI agents has been named a leader by every major analyst group, including Forrester, Gartner, and IDC. Enterprises and organizations all over the world are using GSX to create fleets of advanced AI agents called Intelligent Digital Workers, or IDWs. These IDWs leverage tons of shareable skills and are highly customizable using the platform's no-code building tools. To try out an IDW and experience AI agents with real agency, head to OneReach.ai.
Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larsen. On this episode, we get to have Robb Wilson. Robb, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
So let's give people a quick overview on you. Do you want to talk about businesses, the book, and give us just a little background to get started?
So I've been in tech for a long time. I started with Avid, so the years of like moving from latex and analog to digital and just kind of kept on going. Built a number of companies, all bootstrapped. That's kind of been my thing. Started building products for other companies and did that for a lot of pretty big names. I think at one point, 8 of the top innovators in the Fortune 500 were like clients. And then decided to build, I really saw that conversational AI or the, traditional UIs that we tend to use were just not cutting it. And so kind of went after what I felt at that time was kind of funny. Now that I think back, was going to be maybe 3 years we were going to embrace this conversational AI world. And it's been 15, I think. So I totally missed that one. But yeah, it started with DARPA project. It's really interesting because Adam Scher, who founded Siri, also started as the DARPA project, and we were like sister projects. Mine was for CAA, his was for military, so mine was more top secrets. But we were essentially asked to work off of their, basically their project and results and try to apply it, the CAA side. So his was like a personal assistant for soldiers in the field. And ours was personal assistant to help train CIA agents. Because they're notoriously shy, just surprises a lot of people. And so trying to get them to do role-playing in person was like near impossible. So the idea was to like do it virtually and have it automated and run scenarios. So did that. It was supposed to become a video game. I don't know if they ever ended up actually launching the video game version of it. But then, Adam's team went on and started Siri and then got bought by Apple. And I just kind of kept grinding, just sort of evolving the tech. And then Siri came out and then, the rest is history. So I've been at this for a while, bottom line. LLMs were like, we wrote a book talking about how they're going to change everything. And people were like, what's an LLM?
What year was that book?
3 years ago? No.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. But obviously we started writing it before then, right? Because, if you ever read a book, Takes a while
Yeah.
for most of us.
And so can you talk about the company now and, just some stats on size or get people a sense that you're maybe not just two guys in your garage?
Yeah. We still began as a research project, right? And so, we're about 250 people. So we're not a Google size by any stretch. And I think the, technology, although it feels like it's hit, it really hasn't. I think recently I read that, Salesforce isn't even adjusting their revenue numbers or growth numbers at all for AI for this year until 2025 because, they believe that most companies are just, still trying to figure out, disoriented, trying to figure out what to do with it. So I think the market's still in the infant stages, and we got a lot of large companies that are trying to get in early, trying to get that head start, and that's what we tend to focus on. It's hard to find talent in a space that's brand new like this.
So, and let's just talk about the offering. So somebody goes to OneReach.ai. What do they, who's your ideal customer and why do they want?
They fall into two categories, whether they acknowledge it or not. And it's, the first category is really what the company's original concept was driven off of, which is, with Siri, Alexa, and Google Home, etc. I had always anticipated that these kinds of tools, and I'm not talking about a speaker, I'm talking about the software and the artificial intelligence that drives it, the natural language logic behind it, was more useful for companies than in your house. An automated home seems a lot less interesting than an automated company. So I even today, I'm shocked that every company doesn't have their own version of a superbot, but here we are. Most companies don't, and that's what I set out to allow companies to do, to come in and create their own Alexa, not use Alexa, not use Google Home in their company, but create their own Alexa, and that the channel for a company isn't going to be best suited as a speaker because clearly who's talking, putting that in a room doesn't make sense, like the device being less critical, but it would be more like a telephone or SMS or Slack or Teams or the kinds of communications that we use in a business environment. So think of like a Siri or Alexa, but designed for, the phone, to be used over the phone or used in text form. But that can still do a lot of automation, even down to like, hey, I need to get approval for my vacation, to customers trying to figure out where their orders are, or blah, blah, blah. So that was the beginning of it. And that's where I've stayed pretty true to is those companies. It's just most companies don't come with this concept that I want my own superbot for my company. They come with, I have this use case that I want to automate. I want to automate password reset, or I want to automate this one particular thing, or these three particular things. And they sort of like imagine that then they'll get into more and more automations. But that's actually begun to change. This, I would say in the last year, we're now starting to get the large companies coming in and saying, hey, we're thinking bigger. We're thinking about federating, this sort of automation. I don't want 1,000 different little bots all over the company that nobody knows which one do I go to do what. We need one central, like smart, intelligent agent that can route you to all these different skills. So, yeah.
So I really want to dig in on the agent. So my one business partner is my brother, and he's super techie. And we just, he just keep, about every other week, he builds either an automation or an AI tool for us intern. And when we hire staff, this is at our media company, when we hire staff who come from other shops, they're like, wow, I can't believe like how automated this is, like how much stuff I don't have to do. Right.
Yeah.
And like on our commute, so we we both live in the same place up in the mountains, and our teams all distributed, but we work together in town. And on our commutes back and forth is my like AI.
Nice.
And so, as he's been teaching me about agents and the possibility for one agent to critique another agent, and like
super exciting.
He's been mapping out ideas of like how we could potentially own companies where like, you know, one staff member has like potentially hundreds of agents working for them who are checking each other's work. So let's back up. Can you explain an agent to someone who doesn't have any idea what we're talking about?
Yeah. So agents are so much simpler to understand by using them than to explain them, but I'll give it a shot. When you use an LLM, right, it's next word prediction. So it's basically going based on the words that I've already printed on the screen. I'm going to guess the next word, and then I'm going to incorporate that word to predict the next word, and then I'm going to incorporate that word to predict the next word, and blah, blah, blah. And at the end, you're like, wow, this actually is a set of coherent ideas. Now, that's the most important part, that behind words are ideas. Words have no purpose without ideas. Ideas are a unintended, you could say, consequence of an LLM. In other words, ideas emerge, but the LLM is not sequencing ideas. And this is in our field more referred to as reasoning. It doesn't understand or contemplate the ideas that are behind these words. We ascribe that to it. Like you hear people always say, oh, it got what I meant, or look, it understood that closing the door is something you need to do before you drive away. We think it understood that, but it didn't. It just happened to be that the words that we've sequenced in the world also have these ideas embedded in it. And the way you can test this out is when you sit with an LLM, you can sit there and just sort of give it a list of items. Let's say it's, hey, before you leave the house, make sure you lock the door, then turn off the heat, blah, 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 right? And if your house is like weird where the thermostat's outside the door, you'll see that it really does a terrible job of helping somebody else go through the natural steps, the reasoning steps of which steps they should do first, second, and third. And it sort of reveals that these LLMs do a pretty poor job at reasoning. But you can sort of, what I call, hack into the fact that a lot of ideas are embedded in the text. So if you're doing generic things like booking travel from one place to another, since the sequence of actions are very common, it will get those right.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
So a couple hours ago, I had another guy on the podcast, and I one of my business partners, Laura Watley, and I interviewed this guy named Wolf from DC, where they're like the digital SWAT team, right? So these big giant companies come and say like, we have these ideas, but it's not working. Can you guys come fix it? And it's like, he's constantly like teaching CEOs about AI and different stuff, right? He had an interesting point that I thought was interesting, that the Germans actually didn't want to call it artificial intelligence. They wanted to call it complex data processing.
Yeah, I get it.
And afterwards, you're talking, it's like almost like complex data acquisition and processing, maybe, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting how like that mental framework feels less esoteric to me.
Yes.
Than artificial intelligence. And like
I'd say it's like anthropomorphic nature.
Data, compute power, and mathematics. And prediction in. Also doesn't feel like quite as much of a mystery. How do you see it differently, or what do you think?
I agree with them. I don't. The problem is like you can't change people. They want to anthropomorphize. They're desperate to do it. So I think as much as that idealistic world is the world I'd like to live in too, where we don't anthropomorphize our technology by saying artificial intelligence, most people don't realize like artificial intelligence is an anthropomorphic term. We've already like blown it because we're ascribing humanity to this thing because we say artificial intelligence. Oh, instead of human intelligence, got it. So I'd love for the term to go away too. And it's also interesting that for us in the space that live and breathe it, we rarely use the term to each other. It's more how we talk to the outside world.
What do you think of each other?
It's going to be more specific, like what type of deep learning algorithms are we using? Classification? Are we not? It's going to be, is this generative? Is this symbolic AI? We're going to get to more of the specifics. Whereas, artificial intelligence is this obtuse word. It's, it doesn't mean anything and it means too much.
I do think about it as like, we're in the middle of getting ready to launch a big venture capital fund in longevity-based biotech, right? And it's like when people say, he's in finance. It's like, well, I don't actually trade any municipal bonds, and I would have no idea how to price one.
Right.
I'd have to study that. It's like,
yes.
It's like technically true. It's technically true in finance. I've just never done anything except alternative investments, private companies. And like,
yeah.
So like I am in this small corner of finance, right?
Yeah.
Is it similar to that?
It is, because if you wanted to like make it even less cool sounding, you'd be like, oh, he's into really good automation, not bad automation. Oh, got it. Automation that can do hard stuff, not easy stuff. Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
And then you're bringing all of these tools together, all these deep learning tools, generative, symbolic, blah blah blah. But to get back to your agents question, imagine a system starts not just predicting the next word, but predicting the next idea or action, which is different. It's not predicting the next word. It's saying the next thing you should do is X, Y, or Z. And that's what agents are. They take it away. They kind of take this other step, this different layer to say the next thing you should do is this. And then after that's done, and then you feed that action in. Okay, that's done. And here's the output of that. Okay, based on that action, here's the next thing you should do. And then you feed the outcome of that, like, oh, flight was booked, but they didn't have anything on that day, so we booked it the next day. All right, the next thing you should do is book the hotel, but a day later. And so it's very similar to this next word prediction, but you're almost saying it's next action prediction. And that's what agents do. And what we know is when you want to do an action, any action, whether it's human action or not, that you usually need data in and data out. In other words, what are your dates that you want to travel? And then that's your input. And then your output would be, here's the hotel, here's the date, blah, blah, blah. Here's the address. So if you have this data in and data out concept, and you have an agent that's like figuring out, oh, the next thing we should do is book a hotel. The next thing we should do is book you an Uber to the airport, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of folks think of this reasoning on what's called hierarchical level of decision-making, which is at the top level. It's, take a train to the airport, fly into whatever city, Uber to that. And then within take a train to the airport, it's, oh, how do I get to the train station? Like that's the next layer of decision-making and actions. And then how do I call an Uber? And so you have this like hierarchy of thought. And this is how we tend to work, right? Like we start with the broad hierarchy of thought, the more general stuff, and then we drill down into each thing. And so that's what agents are. But what makes them super exciting is that when they're integrated with context and your data, then it can make decisions based on your calendar when to book the flight. And it can look at context of where you're going and the address to decide what hotel. So now the agents, before it's asking you for all of this information, like typical interfaces, you have to go in and plug all this information in. It's going to go see if it already knows it from past conversations you've had with it or other machines. And if it does, it starts to fill that in. And when you realize, like, at some point, the agent doesn't need to ask you anything, right? It's got all the information it needs to complete a task on its own. All it needs from you is like go ahead and do it. And only because you want that sense of control, which makes sense. Now you have a swarm of agents that can just conjure an army of workers that are out there doing work for you and have all of your information that it needs to not be constantly bombarding you with questions like, when do you want to go? And so when you think of that agent swarm concept, because that integration of data is there and I'm a big fan of past conversations as the source. A lot of people talk about that coming from like Salesforce and structured data. But honestly, I think that's like the shallow pool of data. What's bigger is imagine every conversation you've had in the last year is available. You're going to have 99% more data and context for that system. So if all of that conversation exists and we call a data fabric, like a communication data fabric, then now your swarm of workers, now we get to the autonomous company, right? That this company's just running, making decisions, doing things, swarming. It's awesome.
This is what I want to talk about. So like a simplified version that I want you to tell me if I understand it correct, right?
Yeah.
Is like right now for outreach, for marketing, somebody's got to sit down and come up with what we're going to do. And like a simple task could be like, to train one agent as like with all of the best copywriting advice for cold outreach that you can get. And then train another agent to be an editor. And like the copywriter, virtual employee comes up with the ideas against the input criteria. But instead of just outputting them, it sends it to an editor who's been programmed to be critical and to look for these questions or inconsistencies and match again, what's persuasive. And then it sends it back to the other agent and says like, hey, fix this. This isn't persuasive enough. Change that. Give me another one. And then they like, you basically like have to set an end date because they'll like go back and forth endlessly if you don't like do 10 iterations. Is that close?
Yeah.
So how would you say it better?
Yeah, it's close. Think of it as an antagonistic pattern that you just created, like two AIs. And I think that's huge. And I think that you as a marketer want to see the conversation and the argument that's going back and forth because you'll learn a lot and you're also in the loop. So I'm a big believer, like put the human in there, not just because, control, but just to learn and see. And what if this was your health, right? What if they were talking about whether or not you should get this operation or what medicine you should use or where you should try a different pill. And you get to see two doctors that are AIs arguing about, and then you make the final decision, right? It's super exciting. And I think that's the way it's going to go. Instead of like AIs are going to make decisions for us. No, they're going to argue and fight in front of us. And then we'll be the arbiter, like the chairman of the board that goes, okay, I'm going with AI Bob today because that's the argument I most am compelled by. And I think that's the world we're going into, not the world where we're out of it, except for the small decisions that we don't care about, like what kind of ink to put in my printer. Then I think we're going to be like, don't need to be in the loop on that one. Just go buy the cheapest, best ink that's out there, which is an interesting idea. I was talking to Gardner on our podcast a while ago. And, I don't think anybody knows the estimates, but a big percentage of our new consumer, like we always think of consumers as being men and, women. And at least in the marketing space, that tends to be the genres, right? The basic, and nobody thinks about machines, but the biggest growing consumer base out there is machines that are going to buy and make decisions. And to your point of marketing, not only are they like, that's antagonistic conversation about selling to a human, but that same thing's going to happen, but the buyer is going to be an AI. So 2, arguing about what best way to portray it, to sell not to a human, to an AI itself that's deciding like, what ink am I going to buy for your printer because you're almost out and you don't want to be bothered with it. That's like the crazy, right? There's implications of this, like, whoa, that's crazy that a third of the buying could be done by computers. What does that do? And what does that do to business when a better product comes out and instantaneously 80% of the buyers out there like become aware of it, and one guy goes from selling like 1 million units a day to 2, and the other goes from 2 to 1 million the next day, and companies go in and out of business instantaneously, like the stock market. When all of a sudden stocks are being bought by machines, we see this crazy shift that can happen so quickly in buying. The same thing would happen in products. I know I'm getting out there, but but it's the implications of these agents operating on our behalf, and then that next tier of, whoa, what if we're selling to an AI agent? What should that text be? And can you manipulate an AI agent the way you can manipulate a person in marketing?
Yeah.
Are they onto it, right?
Yeah. Okay, first, I don't think we actually told people. Tell people the name of your book, where to get it. Tell people the name of your podcast, where to check it out.
Sure, yeah. So book is Age of Invisible Machines. Amazon, anywhere. I think our publisher has pretty much put it wherever you buy books. Invisible Machines is the podcast, so it's just a follow-up because you write a book about AI, there's no way the conversation is over. And then it's all based on the company we started. Like I said, came out of that research project, which is OneReach.ai, which is the company that we basically apply, these conversational applications for large businesses and small.
So I am so fascinated with the concept of autonomous companies, or even like primarily,
Yes. Yeah.
What's another principle for people who, like us, like we don't have your decade plus in machine learning and complex data processing. For people like us who are entrepreneurs, willing to learn, but don't come out of a deep expertise in it, but are willing to put in the years to get a deep expertise, what kind of advice would you have for us as we want to get to being a primarily autonomous company or start new primarily autonomous?
Yeah, I'd say the intimidation and the idea that people go to deep learning first, I don't know why, but people tend to attack the big, complicated problem, the things that software can't do today. And that's when they go in over their head, get confused and fail, and then, it doesn't go anywhere. But starting small and simple with your own, like I said, I don't know why every company doesn't have a Siri. Like, why not? Start there, answer questions. Most people go, oh, well, I want to load.
Thank you, Siri.
Of course that happened. Most people want to load all of their knowledge base, all of their documents that they've ever created into a LLM and then ask it questions, right? Which is a monstrosity of a task. And it doesn't work, by the way. It's pipe dreams that are sold by companies that should have never got funded by VCs that are overzealous in the AI space. The idea that you can just dump a bunch of thousands of documents into a training, vector DB, and suddenly it's just going to answer questions flawlessly is just a pipe dream. Most people don't realize how much effort goes into getting Wikipedia to be what it is, how much manual effort structuring the data. People forget that our websites, we spend a lot of money on making them Google search friendly. And your documents, you've done nothing to make them ready for AI. So the idea that they're just all going to get loaded in and just work, not going to happen. But what you can do with 10 or 20 documents is unbelievable. It's fun. It's great. It's useful.
So for instance, just to become I've got, I record most of my sales calls, right?
Yeah.
If we transcribe those, what would we need to do with those documents if we wanted?
Yeah. So what I really like LLMs for is not necessarily talking to them as much as them extracting relevant data from those sales calls. So if you notice in Zoom, and I actually was just talking to the CIO of Zoom, and they have this new feature now, summarize my call, right?
Yeah, I just turned it on the seat.
Yeah. So you summarize your call and you're like, wow, that's pretty good, but pretty useless. And we think about the implications of that, oh, I don't need to be on the call now because it'll just summarize it for me. And we go, oh, what if everybody says that? Now we don't need to be on the call. So one of the biggest problems with AI and all of this and what you're asking for is it forces that question of what's the call for? why did you have the call? What's its purpose? Which is uncomfortable for a lot of people because a lot of people just have meetings for meeting's sake. So it kind of uncovers the fact that this meeting had no reason. And so you're like, well, if the meeting has no reason to load that into anything and put it anywhere, and there's no way you're going to get usefulness out of it.
Yeah, the meeting wasn't useful in the first place.
Right, when it wasn't useful. So I believe that Zoom meetings and meetings in general, we sort of treat it like spreadsheets or Craigslist. It's like this very generic tool for doing anything. But if you look at what Zoom meetings or meetings in general, conferences online are, my parents use it for exercise class. Someone else uses it for a sales meeting. Someone else uses it to have their board meetings. I think if you sort of narrow the use case down and say, okay, if it's specifically for sales and it's specifically for a certain purpose in sales, the value of not just summarize the meeting, but summarize the meeting of trying to extract very specific points that you want out of it. And then of those points, share them with very specific people that would be interested in it. That's where it gets powerful. Or to extract that data and maybe the interested party is an AI that's going to make a decision. So it's, hey, pull this information out of this transcript if it exists, place it over here so that if the AI is going to make a decision on travel for me, that it utilizes that. So bottom line is to ask an AI to extract minutes from a meeting, but not tell it what you need that data for, and what data you're looking for. It's going to be useless. And so you got to step back and go, what matters? What data matters in this that I want? Where do I want it to go? Who do I want it to go to? And that becomes a lot less about extracting data and the LLM itself and more about all of the just simple logic that has nothing to do with AI, the agent that says, oh, anything that talks about traveling, put it over here into this bucket and let HR know that there might be travel plans coming their way. And so thinking more granularly about how to extract it, and then more importantly, not just extract data, but how does it become an action that an agent can take and then do something?
This is super helpful. So one of our new products we're thinking about is inventing a media company, kind of like trying to become the number one source on longevity finance.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so we can scrape the web and get everybody else's news releases and their YouTube podcasts and their, right. But, and it's such a key point of but what are we trying to extract out? What is, what's the lead here on the story? Like, even if we're just going to link out, instead of plagiarizing stuff, or just say, hey, this great thing came out, go to this website, get it, right? We're like that Reader's Digest, we're like the aggregator.
Right.
The point of so often those things don't have, they buried the lead themselves. They haven't come up with a good need for what they're put out there. So this idea of adding that extra scrutiny of what is the point here? What's novel? What, as either a longevity CEO or a longevity investor, what is the most relevant concept that what makes this piece unmissable or something? And
right.
Anyways, that's how I'm thinking about it. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, and also context of for who, not for everyone, for who. I have a particular set of challenges, and the context for me. So you're not going to get one extract. Maybe you get 1 million or 100 extracts because different. You put people in personas, right? And you go, look, I don't want to do an extract for each person, but I'm going to use AI and I'm going to summarize it 50 different ways based on on 50 different personas that I've created. And each persona I've built out as context that says, hey, you're 50 years old, you're in pretty good health, you're reading this article, you already take vitamins, you already exercise, what's novel? Versus you're 20 years old, you eat like shit, you don't exercise, what's novel, right? I think now that you can do 50 extracts, that's what swarming gives you, right? Versus like in a way we're anthropomorphizing, like, well, who would do more than one summary? But thinking it, so the biggest challenge isn't the tech, it's just thinking in this new way that you have unlimited resources. You have an army of unlimited resources that you don't have to limit yourself to one summary. You can make 1,000 summaries of one article.
Well, what's interesting is like, have one for, the same article, like here's the lead for finance people, specifically for longevity investors, right?
Yeah.
Here's the implication for longevity CEOs and senior executives. Here's the implication for insurance companies and national medical. Here's the implication for like biohackers or individuals, right? And like, if you have an unlimited workforce, sure, why wouldn't you have something personalized for you?
Yeah. Early on in my career, I did a project for Schwab, and it was creating a custom email newsletter for every investor based on the stocks they owned. So it was just news extracted on the stocks that they own. So same idea, right? It wasn't the generic newsletter for everyone. It was very particular to them and extracting news on the stocks that they would care about. That was a fairly easy algorithm, still plays today. But like if you took it to action and you said, okay, you guys are creating a GPS for health, right? Like, wake up in the morning, what should I do now? Don't eat those Fruit Loops. Okay, I ate the Fruit Loops. Okay, recalculating. Take the dog for an extra long walk. But it's taking, hey, based on this article that just came out today, you should try eating this morning. Like where it doesn't anchor it, it anchors it in an action in like the context of your day. And it says, hey, based on an article I read, you should eat carrots this morning. Let's try it. You up for it? Yes. Versus, hey, read an article, you should eat carrot.
Okay. So let's bring it up some more questions. I hope you go deep because I'm loving it.
Oh yeah.
So, with health, I mean, there's major liability, right?
Yes.
And like if you get it, like you get the GPS wrong, somebody got to the meeting time.
Yes.
If you get health wrong, I mean, worst case, somebody died.
Yeah, right? That's why I love the adversarial thing you talked about, because two AIs are arguing. You decide which one are you going to blame. You can't.
Okay, I never thought about this. I never thought of this right now of letting a reader see the AIs argue.
Right,
and because like you got to think, we could have, because it wouldn't just have to be two, right? You could have the research scientist. You could have
exactly.
You could have a simulated research scientist, a simulated MD, a simulated, kidney specialist, a simulated workout, nutritionalist, something like, right? And like you could say like, hey, this new article, this new piece came out in the Lancet, and here's the implication, and here's our AI debate on how you may want to think about this.
Exactly.
And then leave it up to them.
Yeah, and it's a new way of thinking, because we're like, oh, well, usually authors write by themselves, so they don't argue with themselves. It seems weird. Like, on this hand, on the other hand, on this hand, like, it's just weird. But with AIs, sure, like, let's have 5 point of views. And what's the answer? The answer to this is there are 5 truths, potentially. Like, that's the reality. So it just forces us to recognize that there is no one truth, and the idea that an AI is going to give us the answer when there's 5 different answers, like, no, give us all 5.
It makes me wonder if they could like click button, be like, okay, which AIs do I want to see the debate between?
Yeah,
re-puts it through, right?
Yeah, it's. I mean, we're already doing this, right? That's what I love about a lot of this stuff, is it sounds esoteric, and then we go, wait, I go to Amazon, there are reviews, I want to see the positive ones, and then I want to click on the negative ones, and I'm going to read them both, and then I'm going to decide if I'm going to buy this product. It didn't have to be people. Those could be AIs. We already do this. It's just,
well,
in these paradigms.
What's interesting about that is like when some new piece comes out, why do I not have, the 150 top expert on an email list saying, hey, who's interested in weighing in on this? Here's the subject, click the button, upload your video, and, put up your video, and AI will check it for, is this self-promotional? Are you
Right.
like, you're going to get fact checked on some things, which might make it a human review. But as long as you pass the 5 following guidelines, we're going to post it. And, first five experts to react, you get free PR.
Yeah. Yeah. And if those experts are AIs, then, experts are expensive. Their time is hard to come by.
We have the AI experts, and then we have the humans who will do it for free because they want the exposure.
Yep.
And then you can contrast those.
Yeah. And you learn so much by watching. Like, it's not like AI's making decisions for us alone now. Now, you actually learn a lot by watching an argument, by watching two sides of it, right? That's why debates are so important in politics. Like, to see them debate and then you make the choice, you've actually learned a lot. You are in the loop. You are in control. And it's a great way to, like, stay up to date and less boring than just reading an article.
Okay, next question.
Yeah.
So thinking about running our venture capital fund in this space, and we want to, create a whole bunch of agents and have X number of humans and then have 100 times that many agents working for it. And dealing with things as complex as help and systems that interact with each other. And knowing that, there isn't perfect transparency out there. A bunch of things are behind, a bunch of breakthroughs are behind paywalls. A lot of information is unpublished because the research center hasn't published it yet. And then there's a bunch of false information. And when you think about sorting through that, what kind of principles would you think through if we wanted agents to assist us with trying to find out what has the highest probability that we should actually spend our human time investigating?
So when it comes to healthcare or anything where the consequences are high, where the hallucinations with LLMs are just a fact. People say they can get rid of them. It's not. It's inherent in the technology. It's probabilistic. It calculates the next word based on a statistical likelihood that that's the next word that comes after these words. And the more unlikely that sequence of words exists on the internet, the more likely it is to hallucinate, period. And once it starts hallucinating, now you're adding words to hallucinations. So it's more likely to keep telling that lie, like a Seinfeld episode, right? It's just gonna go down deeper and deeper into the lie.
Wolf talked about it. He says, back to your assigning human traits. He's like, we call it a hallucination. It's just a wrong prediction. Like the math,
exactly.
The math had it had 95% chance it should be this, and this was the 5% of the time it was wrong.
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah. That's oversimplified, but how would you say differently?
If I wanted to get nitpicky, I'd say, what's wrong? Like, it wasn't wrong, right? It is the word that most likely came after those words. It's just wrong to you.
Yeah, it just doesn't line up with the physical.
Yeah, your worldview. Exactly. Like,
it doesn't line up with the laws of gravity. But it's the correct prediction of the highest probability.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, let's go back to my army of venture capital researchers.
Yes. So in the future, we're going to have a different technology for reasoning that makes decision making. This idea that generative AI is going to be the tool for reasoning, not likely going to be the technology. We'll probably potentially see a huge decline in generative over 5 years from now, where it really gets relegated to what it is, which is more of a user interface than it is any kind of logic engine or brain or anything else. It'll just be another way to talk to machines that understands and can convert it to other systems that are good at reasoning. For a lot of the stuff that's critical, you want the old school reasoning algorithms in there. If this, then that. If this, then that. You want these human supervised or at least moderated logic trees that make decisions that ensure that it's not going to go off the rails.
And what is it called? What are those categories of those logic engines called?
What you might want to call it symbolic AI, but it's really just algorithmic thinking, right? It's just typical software, logic. where it gets cool is when you mix it. So most people think of an LLM as AI. It's not. It's AI is just machines acting like humans. That's the definition of AI. If a machine does something that's typically done by humans, then we call it AI. And then after a while, it's no longer AI because we're used to it being done by machines now, and it's new things that are AI. I talked to one of the folks from MIT, and she said the one thing about working in AI is you never get to work on anything that fully actually works well, because by the time it works well, it's not AI anymore. That moves on because now machines typically do it. It's not AI, and now we got to go to the next thing that barely works, which is kind of fun in some ways. But so you mix generative AI concepts, symbolic AI concepts, traditional logic, and that's how you would approach something like healthcare, where you're using classification of the system to know, like, hey, if we're just talking about the best way to exercise this morning to keep you entertained, meaning just let's mix it up. Sure, generative, let's go. Like, take a walk to the park, right? Like, oh, we got it wrong. It's raining. Like, who cares? Nobody cares. But if it comes down to like, what, medicine should I take? Oh, no, we're going to go to symbolic AI or logic tree. And to the end user, they don't know. They don't need to see that, right? But generative AI is itself just a tool in a toolbox. You need a whole cognitive architecture that combines all these things together. And then you end up with a full solution, which you can kind of mix and match based on the severity of it. So at OneReach, we really focus on that classification piece. Like, that's the thing that seems to be the most. It's at the top of the tree. It says, how critical is this? What type of question is this? And then that routing. Once you get that right, everything falls into place. That's like the point of the spear, I guess. And that's why we always say, like, the Siri, right, in your company. That's why you'd want to start there with just at the very top, because you're getting the routing. Like, what type of question is this? Should this be generative? Should this go to this algorithm? Should this go to this API? Start there. And if you get that right, all of a sudden your automation just starts to happen. Agents can operate in there, but they're not good at by themselves at classification like that. Like, is this a critical question or not?
This is so fun. I feel like I don't have any more questions. Probably just 5 or 6 more hours. So let's do this though. Let's go back to, if CEOs or investment fund managers or people who are listening today, how do they know if they're the right kind of client to be calling?
This is always a good question. The companies or customers that tend to appreciate us the most. Let's look at it from not like, who do I want, but who wants us typically. Is the ones who have tried it and failed, the ones that are more sophisticated, and then also the ones that are serious. In my early career, Apple hired me to create one of the first iPad apps when they were launching the iPad originally. And it was really important to them to get that iPad at the first apps, right? Because that was what sold the iPad. It was the apps, not the device itself. And so Martha Stewart, before she went to jail, calls my team in, and she's like, hey, we want to create an iPhone app for planning your wedding, right? Which is like, oh, that's easy, right? But it's not like planning your wedding is complicated. And so we went through like a design phase, and hey, it's going to cost $200,000 just to start thinking about it. And she's like, what? I could get a college kid to do this for $15K. And of course, I was like, then you should do that if that's go for it. And I think there's like, in the early stages, there's companies want to spend and risk a little bit of money to try it and see how it goes. But it's really like, they try it, they fail, and it's almost better they didn't spend it. Like, is that $15K really worth it to her? No, it's $15K to find out it wasn't going to work, and that she's got to spend more. And then it took her time. So it's companies that have tried it, probably already tried the $15K route, said, okay, we want to do this for real. and not the ones who tried the 15K route and said, "Oh, AI sucks," or we're not good at it. We're not going to do that again.
Well, what do you want to leave people with today?
Boy, the one thing I think I would love. It's funny because I'm in this space, right? So it's always interesting that I am kind of often seen as like down on LLMs. But I'd love people to kind of like understand that LLMs are really a small piece of the bigger puzzle, and to not think that, going in and buying Copilot, for example, is like an AI strategy, right? It's just an LLM. It's just a small piece. It writes stuff for us. It summarizes stuff badly for us. That's pretty much what it is. And that most companies, when they think, oh my God, if we start, getting generative AI in-house, we'd be able to automate all these things. I had this one company say, hey, we're going to implement Copilot for every employee. And I'm like, you're not going to see you're not going to get rid of a single employee. Like you're not going to cut any costs. And they're like, what do you mean? How can you know that? And I said, because they're already using OpenAI now. Like, and how many people did you cut? Have you noticed? Like, is anyone's cost going down? Like, if it's out there, they're using it. Now you're just going to spend more. Nothing's going to change, because you really need that broader strategy. So the biggest thing I'd want is take it seriously. It's a huge opportunity. And most importantly, don't imagine that you can take 100,000 documents, suck it into some process, and now you have an LLM that can answer any question. That is a big task. And I'd say it's a great place to start, but start small.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining this ongoing conversation about conversational AI. Be sure to subscribe to Invisible Machines wherever you get your podcasts, and if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app. You can also watch these conversations on the Invisible Machines YouTube channel. This podcast is produced for UX Magazine in partnership with OneReach.ai. Over the past 5 years, our team of nearly 200 engineers, scientists, experienced designers, anthropologists, and linguists have been developing Generative Studio X, an award-winning platform that has the lone distinction of being named a leader by every major analyst group. GSX is a complete environment for hosting, creating, analyzing, and scaling your own digital teammates called Intelligent Digital Workers. For an interactive demo of IDWs in action and to learn more about the GSX platform, head to OneReach.ai. This podcast would not be possible without the hard work and dedication of executive producer Elias Parker and producer Kate Timchenko. Our video and audio editor is Michael Litvinov, and we rely on support from the marketing team at OneReach.ai, including Allison Harshberger, Anastasia Nechtalio, and Vera Prokodko. Thanks again, and we look forward to connecting with you next week, right here on Invisible Machines.